You are riding a train home. Your ears are still ringing from the first blast. Your skin is burned, your city is gone, and somehow you are still alive. This is August 8th, 1945. 3 days ago, you were in Hiroshima. Now you are on a train heading south to Nagasaki. And in about 36 hours, the second bomb is going to fall directly on top of you. Your name is Tsutomu Yamaguchi, and you are about to become the only person officially recognized by the Japanese government as a survivor of both atomic bombings. But this is not a story about luck. It is a story about what radiation actually does to the human body, what survival costs, and why 80 years later we still do not fully understand the damage. Let's start at the moment everything changed. On the morning of August 6th, 1945, Yamaguchi was in Hiroshima on a business trip. He worked as an engineer for Mitsubishi Heavy Industries, one of Japan's largest manufacturing companies. He had been sent to the city to help design oil tankers for the wartime Navy. At 8:15 in the morning, he was walking toward the shipyard when he saw something impossible. A single B-29 bomber, high above the city, released one object. One bomb. It fell for 43 seconds. Then the sky turned white. The bomb detonated at approximately 1,900 feet above the city center. The temperature at the hypocenter, that's the point directly below the explosion on the ground, reached an estimated 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit. That is roughly the surface temperature of the sun. The blast wave traveled outward at the speed of sound. Yamaguchi was about 1.8 miles from the hypocenter. The shockwave hit him like a wall. It threw him into a ditch. His eardrums ruptured. His upper body was badly burned. The left side of his face was scorched. Around him, the city simply ceased to exist. Within 1 mile of the hypocenter, over 90% of buildings were destroyed instantly. Between 70,000 and 80,000 people died in the first seconds. Another 70,000 would die within the following months from burns, injuries, and radiation sickness. Yamaguchi crawled to an air raid shelter. He spent the night there, surrounded by the wounded and the dying. By morning, he had made a decision that seems almost incomprehensible. He was going home, to Nagasaki. He arrived on August 8th. He went to the hospital. He was bandaged. And on the morning of August 9th, he reported back to work at the Mitsubishi factory in Nagasaki. He was sitting at his desk, telling his supervisor about what had happened in Hiroshima. His supervisor said he did not believe it. One bomb could not destroy an entire city. It was impossible. At 11:02 in the morning, the second bomb detonated. This time, the hypocenter was about 2.2 miles from where Yamaguchi was sitting. Once again, the flash. Once again, the shockwave. Once again, the buildings around him collapsed. Once again, he survived. This is where the science of what happened inside his body becomes the real story. And it is a story most people get wrong. When a nuclear weapon detonates, it releases several forms of energy simultaneously. There is the blast wave, a wall of compressed air that flattens structures. There is the thermal radiation, heat so intense it causes degree burns miles from the explosion. And then there is ionizing radiation. This is the invisible part, and it is the part that keeps killing long after the flash fades. Ionizing radiation means energy powerful enough to strip electrons from atoms inside your cells. When that happens to the molecules in your DNA, the instruction manual your body uses to build and repair itself, the instructions get corrupted. Cells can no longer divide properly. Some die immediately. Others begin to mutate. The immediate effects are called acute radiation syndrome. Within hours of massive exposure, the body begins to break down. Nausea, vomiting, the destruction of bone marrow, which is where your blood cells are produced, internal bleeding, immune system collapse. Your body essentially forgets how to keep itself alive. Yamaguchi survived the acute phase twice, and that is where the long-term story begins. For decades after the bombings, researchers at the Radiation Effects Research Foundation, known as RERF, a joint program between the United States and Japan established in 1947, tracked the health of atomic bomb survivors. Their study, called the Lifespan Study, has followed over 120,000 people since 1950. It remains the single largest and longest-running investigation into the effects of radiation exposure on human beings. What they found was not just higher rates of cancer, though those were significant. Leukemia rates among survivors peaked between 6 and 8 years after exposure. Solid cancers, tumors in the lungs, stomach, thyroid, and breast, appeared at elevated rates for the rest of survivors' lives. But the RERF data revealed something more subtle and more disturbing. Survivors showed higher rates of cardiovascular disease, higher rates of cataracts, elevated risk of thyroid dysfunction, chronic inflammation of the lining of the heart. The radiation had not just targeted one organ, it had attacked the body's ability to maintain itself at every level. Dr. James Yamazaki, an American physician who led a U.S. medical team studying the effects of radiation on children in Nagasaki, described what he saw as a kind of biological debt. The body survives the moment, but the cells carry the damage forward. Every division after exposure carries a small additional risk of error. Over decades, those errors compound silently, invisibly, until something breaks. Yamaguchi himself experienced this firsthand. His burns healed slowly. His hearing in his left ear never fully recovered. He suffered from radiation-related illnesses throughout the remaining decades of his life. Leukemia, cataracts in both eyes, chronic pain. And yet he lived. He lived until 2010, dying at the age of 93. How? That is the question that matters more than the fact of his survival. Distance played a role. Yamaguchi was far enough from both hypocenters to avoid the zone of total destruction. The buildings around him in Nagasaki partially shielded him from the worst of the blast. The terrain in Hiroshima offered some protection from the direct thermal flash. But the deeper answer is biological. Yamaguchi's body did something that scientists still study. His cells somehow repaired enough of the double-strand DNA breaks, the most severe type of genetic damage, to keep functioning. His immune system rebuilt itself from surviving stem cells. His bone marrow recovered enough to produce blood cells. Not perfectly, not without cost, but enough. There is a term for what radiation does to DNA. It is called a double-strand break. Imagine your DNA as a twisted ladder. A single-strand break means one side of the ladder snaps. Your cells can usually fix that. A double-strand break means both sides snap at the same time. That is far more dangerous. The repair is often imperfect. And imperfect repair means mutations that can lead to cancer years or decades later. The RERF data shows a pattern that is both terrifying and instructive. Among the hibakusha, the Japanese term for atomic bomb survivors, literally meaning bomb-affected people, many who survived the acute phase lived into their 70s, 80s, and 90s. The human body is remarkably capable of repair, but it does not forget. The damage accumulates silently, and the longer you live, the more chances those corrupted cells have to cause problems. For most of his life, Yamaguchi did not speak publicly. The social stigma faced by hibakusha was enormous. Many were discriminated against in employment and marriage. Some hid their survivor status entirely from neighbors, employers, even their own children. The radiation had not only damaged their bodies, it had marked them as something society wanted to avoid. It was not until 2006, at the age of 89, that Yamaguchi went public with his story. He began speaking at schools and public events. He wrote songs, actual musical compositions, about what he had witnessed. He petitioned the Japanese government to officially recognize the small group of people who had survived both bombings. In 2009, the city of Nagasaki formally certified him as a double survivor. He was, at that time, the only person to hold that distinction with official government recognition. But here is the part that connects directly to your life. Today, there are over 400 active nuclear power plants operating across 32 countries. 9 nations possess nuclear weapons, with an estimated combined stockpile of roughly 12,500 warheads. The Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, a group founded in 1945 by Manhattan Project scientists who had built the first bomb, currently sets their doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight. That is the closest it has ever been in its 78-year history. The technology that nearly killed Tsutomu Yamaguchi twice is more widespread, more powerful, and more accessible than it was in 1945. The physics has not changed. The biology has not changed. Only the scale has changed. Yamaguchi himself, near the end of his life, said something that should stop you cold. He said that humanity must find a way to coexist without these weapons, not because it is morally right, but because the math does not work. 1 city, 2 cities, 3. The numbers only go in one direction, and each number means real human bodies absorbing real ionizing radiation, their DNA fracturing in ways that will echo through their cells for the rest of their lives. This is what makes radiation different from almost every other threat we face. A burn heals, a broken bone sets, a wound closes, but radiation alters the blueprint itself. It rewrites the instructions your body uses to stay alive, and those rewritten instructions do not expire. You started this video thinking about one man who got impossibly lucky. One survivor with a remarkable story, but luck is not what happened. Tsutomu Yamaguchi was not lucky. He was resilient in ways that science is still working to quantify. His body endured catastrophic damage twice. His cells carried the scars for 8 more decades, and he used every one of those decades to tell you what it actually cost. The bomb does not care about luck. It does not care about courage or willpower or the desire to live. It cares about distance, shielding, and time. And right now, you are living in the time that comes after. The question is not whether another city will face what Hiroshima and Nagasaki faced. The question is whether the story you just heard will feel like ancient history, or like a warning you chose to ignore. You started this video riding a train home, not knowing what was coming. You are finishing it knowing exactly what radiation does to a human body, and knowing that the same physics, the same biology, and the same destructive power are still here. The only thing that has changed is whether you think about it.